I was just explaining, not just, maybe a couple months ago, eyesight, line of sight to my nephew
Yeah.
and how that works and why you're actually trying to line up when you're going back and forth from the camera. You're trying to actually line up where they're looking. So your brain can easily, oh, look, they're talking.
And you're talking about on set when like two actors
Yeah,
are
yeah,
talking with each other and they're not necessarily looking each other in the eyes, but you
yeah,
wanted to make that you got to Hollywood it, right?
yeah,
Like just fake it, make it look right in the edit.
yeah,
Or even if it's like a two shot or something, a lot of times
yeah.
like the actors are facing each other, but you're like looking past each other or you're sitting at kind of an awkward angle so that yeah,
I
you
mean,
get that eyesight.
yeah, I mean, half the time when there's a one shot and two actors are like this close to each other,
Uh-huh.
I think to myself, I have never stood that close to anyone, maybe like other than my wife. Like that's like the most. Why would you ever be that close to someone at like a
Yeah.
work setting too? It's like the West Wing, and they're like standing right next to each other. Like that would be harassment. Do not stand that close to me.
Or it's like that episode of Seinfeld with the close stalkers.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. Yeah,
he's a close stalker, Jerry.
he's a close one.
How's your week been? How's everything going?
It's been good. It's been a busy week. We redelivered Pi to
Yeah.
the international distributor, which was great. He approved of my mix down. I fixed a couple things
Okay.
in the film. I swear I tried so hard to fix. It's your note to shorten one of the scenes, when
Yeah.
the shirt argument scene.
Okay.
I tried really hard. I really wanted to like
Yeah.
deliver with that scene cut down. Like,
Yeah.
I was so excited to like maybe show it to you, but then I realized that it's just creating more problems. And it's
Okay.
at this point, lesson learned, but like at this point,
I mean,
maybe I'll make
sometimes that's just the best version of the edit. Not everything can be perfect,
yeah,
but um, the thing that I've kind of noticed with working on that movie was that was like really the first like comedy film I think I've really ever done. And the thing about comedy that I'm still kind of learning is that it's all about the timing,
yeah,
right? It's about the timing with the actors and in the edit, right? And so
yeah.
that you can fix some of the timing issues in the edit, but if you don't have it, the right things in the can already ready to
Oh
go,
yeah,
you're just not going to be able to get it right.
yeah,
And that's what makes brilliant comedians work
yeah.
on screen, right? They've got that
The
natural
timing.
comedic timing.
Yeah,
So definitely learned a lot from working on that one. But I would say overall, like, I mean, there aren't too many moments that don't work, and a lot of times we can
yeah.
just leave the camera in a two shot and it
Oh yeah,
works great. Which is, that's saying a lot about your directing, your writing, and the acting, both with you in the scenes and whoever else is opposite of you. And that's hard to pull off in a two shot. So
yeah.
good job.
Thank you to both of us.
Yes.
I've actually gotten multiple over the years. I've gotten compliments from people about how it was shot. Like some
Nice.
people have like specifically called out that it looks great. It doesn't look like a lot of like it doesn't. It looks more like a film than it does, you know, um, a standard that comedy
Yeah.
filter. Like
Yeah.
so. They've gotten a lot of compliments and over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both stylistic and naturalistic, right? It's
Yeah,
stylistic in the way that we compose the shots, and use shooting it on that black magic camera that has the really tiny sensor kind of
yeah,
gives you that really deep depth of field,
yeah,
right? And so you get a lot in focus, which I think of most not only comedies but like in general, like a lot of you know recent films, they like to have that really shallow depth of field. They shoot it from a distance,
yeah,
especially with the newer cameras that are all full frame. I mean,
yeah,
the depth of field is just like razor thin on those. So it's just a completely different look in terms of the composition. But then in terms of lighting, we don't overly light anything, right?
yeah,
We kind of either amplify the existing practical lights in the scene, or just add a little bit, maybe a kicker or something here or there, just to kind of give it a little bit of extra. But like it's not
Yeah.
stylistic lighting choice. So I think the combination of those things worked out, and it's got a very cohesive look to it, which is saying something considering we shot it over such a long period of
Yeah.
time. It's hard to stay consistent with those things. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but props us for we I mean, I don't know how much that first camera cost, but it died. And we just found it again for $1,000 on eBay.
yeah, yeah. So the funny story about that is that that original Black Magic camera came from our VFX studio from
Oh.
Bill the Galactic Hero.
Oh.
So that
I
was
didn't
the
know that.
camera that I shot all the green screen plates with for all the models. If you remember
Nice.
working on that.
I do. I do.
Just a little background for the listeners. Back in 2013 to 2014, I worked with Alex Cox, who at the time was a professor at CU Boulder, which is where both me and Josh went. And he had this kind of grand idea to make like the world's most expensive, most ambitious student film. And he raised $100,000 on Kickstarter, and we were able to make this adaptation of Bill the Galactic Hero, the novel. And Alex Cox had secured rights to this film like all the way back in like the early 80s and had written a script and was just never able to make it. And so finally he decided, well, he's got to do something with these rights. It's just they're going to expire or whatever. So we did this science fiction film at CU Boulder with just $100,000, and it was all students that worked on it. But I was the VFX supervisor, and then I brought on Josh at one point to help me out with some of the effects toward the end because like we were like working on this for like a year straight, like every single day, and most of the people that were working underneath me had never worked on any film before, let alone a VFX project. So I had brought in like just artists to build models. I had, one guy who I brought in to help me with the camera work, but basically I had my hands in like every single part of it. But
Yeah.
the main camera that we had in our studio to shoot all of our VFX background plates and our green screen was that Black Magic camera. It was the original Black Magic cinema
Yeah.
camera, which was like the 2.5K, and it had this tiny little sensor on it. It was like a little bit bigger than, or actually a little bit smaller than a Super 16.
Yeah. Which I think is why it looked a lot like 16 millimeter.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great looking camera. So we got that, and then as you mentioned, at one point that camera died on us, and we found the same camera on eBay and
Yeah.
bought that.
Yeah.
So and that got us through the rest of the shoot. And then toward the end, I had gotten a Blackmagic 4K pocket, and we used
Yeah.
that for some of the night scenes in the
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look closely, you can see how much better that camera
Yeah.
is.
Right.
But it's the nice thing is the color science was similar enough that when we did the edit and all of the color grading and whatnot, it still matched up. That it still had a cohesive look to it. So but yeah, I've always loved those Black Magic cameras, and big fan of the look
Yeah.
of those cameras.
Yeah. I'm gonna make some Blu-rays.
Yes,
I owe you a Blu-ray, and I'm gonna make some Blu-rays now that the distribution company has stopped selling the Blu-rays. So I
yeah,
feel like it's a perfect opportunity to start selling them ourselves.
yeah,
And
absolutely,
and if they get mad, I'll send them a statement with a bunch of recoupable expenses and their 25% cut. Just minusing the
yeah,
recoupable expenses, and clearly they'll never get to the actual number. It'll be a
right.
very fair assessment of the
Well,
relationship.
Blu-rays are sort of making a comeback. People are
Absolutely.
starting to see the value in those things, especially with the inconsistency with streaming. And you never know if your favorite movie is going to be available on a specific platform, um, and people are rediscovering things like behind the scenes footage and commentary and all of that stuff that you rarely get on streamers anymore, which is nice. So it's good to see that there's some enthusiasm out there, not only with fans, but just like, general moviegoers are starting to question, like how can I own this movie?
Yeah.
You might go spend $20 on Apple TV to buy a movie now, but like, do you really own it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
in the cloud, you
Yeah.
know.
You own it as long as there's internet.
Well,
Yeah.
not only that, like I had my Apple ID stolen like 3 years ago, and like I had that Apple ID for like 10 years. And so, like, every app that I'd ever bought, everything that I've ever bought on iTunes, like, all gone,
Yep.
unrecoverable. So, like,
Same.
thousands of dollars of shit just gone overnight because um, it's yeah, I lost it to like a phishing scam or something like that. It's really dumb. I mean, it was a stupid thing on my part to do, but nonetheless, I was never able to recover that. And so, like, yeah, if you've got a big movie or a music collection on Apple, for example, you may just lose it.
I can give you the it'll make you feel better. Same thing, but even dumber. I had a app. My old Apple ID was my college email,
Okay.
and they canceled it after 5 years. I've never been able to recover it.
Yeah. Right.
A
Well,
lot. I only lost like 10 movies, but still, it was
well, they tell you like we're sending you an authorization to your email, and you're like, I don't have that fucking email anymore.
exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. College
Well,
laptop.
well, I'm glad you got that all tied up with the distributor with About Pie. That's exciting.
Yeah.
It seems like there's always something going on with that movie.
Yeah. The little movie that could,
Yeah,
or can.
you can. Well, so I know you gave me some homework of movies to watch, and I gave you some homework.
Yes.
What were you able to watch since the last time we met?
I watched Don't Look Now. I also started watching Hour of the Wolf and realized, oh, this is all in Swedish, so I'm not going to watch that right now. Um, it just takes a little. It takes a little. I can't remember if some of the Igmar Bergman movies we watched were dubbed, but or maybe just because I was in a classroom setting and forced to
Yeah,
be there
right.
that I had to watch it, or just an energy. It just requires a little extra energy to read
It
and
does.
and part of it is I really want to like watch the film. I want to assess
Yeah.
you know, the craft of it. So it's hard when there's subtitles.
You can't have
But
it on in the background, that's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Yep. You have to be
um,
actively viewing it for
yeah.
sure.
But watch Don't Look Now. And then the two of us happened to go see The Sinners this week.
Yes, we saw Sinners. And then lastly, you recommended
Yes,
Pontypool, and I
yes.
actually watched that last night. I'm super tired today because like it was so random because um, I haven't been able to sleep well like all week because of these meds that I'm on for my back.
Ooh,
They like I don't know what it is, but like I'm like in this really like light sleep where like anything wakes me up, and usually I'm just like a rock. I
yeah.
hit the pillow and I'm just like out all night. Um, and then it's also like giving me like all this energy, which is really weird. But it really caught up with me last night because I went to bed around like 10:30, and then I woke up at 1 o'clock, and I'd seen that you had sent over
Oh,
that movie to watch, and I
yeah.
was just like, well, I can't, I'm gonna try to get back to bed, but then I couldn't. So I'm like, okay, I'll watch this movie. So I get my laptop and I'm watching Pontypool at like 1 a.m. last night, and then I watched that, and then like I was like completely wide awake by the end. And so now it's like, I don't know, like 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that. So I get out of bed and I'm just like, I better just go work. And so I
Right.
came downstairs into the office and I started working on Dødsmark. And I wrote for like 9 hours today on that script.
So
So I've basically been up since last night, just like totally dead now because like I'm just like my mind is just completely
just
melted from all of
just
that.
mush.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry I was part of keeping you up, but it sounds like you one liked it, and two, or at least it inspired you to write some.
Yeah. So um it's interesting because there's definitely a lot of things that I did like about the movie. It's a little bit silly in
Yeah,
terms of the premise.
yeah,
And for those of you who don't know what it is, like I didn't know either, it's a Canadian horror film about this basically this radio personality and who gets trapped in this basement studio with these two women who are his producers, right? And they discover that basically there's like some type of infection going around that's turning people in these sort of like zombie but not really zombie type creatures. And they discover that it's being spread by using words. So like
Yeah.
talking is actually what causes this thing to spread. And that's what I mean. Like it's the premise itself is a little bit silly, it's a
Right.
little bit outlandish, but I think that the reason that what I do like about it is, and the reason why we're even watching this movie and some of the other ones is because we're talking about chamber dramas, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about movies that take place in a single location or like primarily in one location, and that's exactly what this is. It's like the whole thing pretty much takes place in this basement studio, and they're able to make it work. And I think the reason for that is like overall, it's a pretty good script in terms of just the writing itself, but also like the dialogue is good. The actors pull it off.
Yeah.
They make it believable, and really, what's different about this movie is it's mostly auditory, right? That causes the terror. You hear like this, you know, the the helicopter guy, who's radioing in to, this is the guy who works for the radio station and who calls in weather reports and traffic reports and stuff like that. And you hear him over the radio basically in
Yeah.
some type of like horrific situation, right? And he's trying to explain to them what's going on. And like, so you hear these things, right? It's not as visual of storytelling, it's more auditory, which I found really interesting because the way that they use sound design is
Yeah.
clearly like the strength of that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I love it's something about movies is, you know, the where the word talkies comes from. I mean, it's, there people are taught like that's like a core premise. I mean, it's a core premise of anything, is communication. Um and people talking in movies, obviously every script is, you know, what do you remember from a movie? A lot of times it's the dialogue, right? And that's the whole kind of conceit of this movie where it's like when an affection's being spread via words, which it's one of those things like it's like a premise you're sort of like, okay, but the way they conclude the film too kind of wraps it. It's like, how do you got to end it? You got to, if you like, you can be as, you can, people can suspend their disbelief or not suspend their disbelief, but if you wrap it up well and effectively, which I think they did, um, it can be very effective.
Yeah, you've got to stick the landing.
Stick the landing. Yeah.
It does kind of suffer from some act 3 problems, which is very common. That's the most common problem with scripts is like you have a really strong first and second act, and then the third act comes along and it's either rushed or there isn't a good explanation, or like, yeah, you don't stick the landing properly or whatever. I think that they did a good job of explaining what was causing this. They figured it out. They also came up with a solution um, that was plausible enough in this universe,
Yeah.
right? for
Yeah.
for it to work. And basically what they figure out is like, this is it's English language that's causing the problem, so they're talking with each other in French, which is convenient because it's a Canadian
Yeah.
film, so they speak French as well, which was interesting. But overall, I did enjoy it. It's very, it's a fast movie. It's like 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Kind of goes by pretty quick. I loved the snowy atmosphere, which I know is something
Yeah.
we're talking about with our script Dødsmark. Is having this snowy landscape, so that was really interesting to see too. But yeah, so I I enjoyed it. Got some good ideas for how we can move forward with our own films with these
Yeah.
chamber pieces and doing things with minimal actors, minimal location, small budget sort of thing, which is kind of our goal right now because for those of you out there in the industry right now, you know that things are a bit difficult. You've either got the very high end of things with the blockbusters like The Sinners,
Right.
$90 million to make that movie, or you've got the ultra low budget movies that are being made for under $250,000 on the other end. So that's kind of the space that we're trying to compete in at the moment. But I would argue that, like, a lot of the horror films that you do see that are coming in at that level are very kind of like typical horror movies, slasher films, just ultra like supernatural ghost movies, things that are like have just been rehashed over and over again. Are you there?
Oh, it's just me.
Yeah. So you mentioned you watched Don't Look Now, right? Right. What were your thoughts on that?
Yes. Yeah. Don't Look Now. Yeah. So Don't Look Now, which is I actually think is also an example
Hmm.
of how you stick the landing. Um, I don't know how much I want to reveal to people, but I guess this movie is over 40 years old,
It's
so
probably over
it's not my
50 by
fault.
now. What is it?
Spoiling it.
1973
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something? Yeah, 73. Okay.
70
Plenty
something.
of time
Yeah.
to watch that one.
It's a yeah. It's a very yeah, it's not my fault. Uh, it's also a very 70s movie. It's one of those films where the craft, you're watching a lot like the craft is
Hmm.
very, you know, at the front of the movie. You're watching like the editing is, you mentioned this before, but the editing is very much
Hmm.
a part of it. You can see the editing a lot. You see
Right.
a lot of the editing choices throughout the film. It's very much like a 70s craft film. I kept thinking about like there's so many things now, especially with like VFX, where I get hired to do something like fix this exact problem I'm saying. Like they're like fishing a
Right.
dead body out of the water, and you can see the lady blink for a second, which it's the 70s, like, and like they're pulling off some great shots in it. It's not, but these days, I'd go in there, I'd,
Yeah.
freeze frame her face, make sure she doesn't blink, a bunch of other, take
Hmm.
out whatever random crap sitting in the background. So, but they, it's still, but I still really enjoy I was enjoying a lot of the craft. It's also just one of those movies, where they did a lot of like
Yeah.
Foley, like a lot of Foley later on. So you're like, a lot of like, feet
Right.
walk, people
Yeah.
walking, and it's like clap, 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 clap. It's a lot of that. But then,
Hmm.
the ending is what made it to me. Like because he keeps seeing this, you know, how his daughter, after
Hmm.
she drowns, or when she drowns, she's wearing this red coat. He keeps seeing this like small figure with a red coat. And when he finally catches up with it, it's like some
The serial killer
little
that's been
dwarf
killing
lady.
all the
And
women.
she, yeah, yeah, and she cuts his, and again, it's like another craft thing. She like kind of like
Yeah.
cleaves the side of his throat, but at the same time, it's still very like effective. And then like you realize that the premonitions he's
Right.
been seeing are his funeral. So that I
Yeah.
thought like that little ending wrapped it up really really nicely.
Yeah, and the
And
supernatural elements of
uh,
it, I think, were really why I wanted to watch this movie and have you watch it as well. I mean, in addition to the editing, which we can talk about a little bit
yeah,
more, but basically so our script that we're writing right now for our folk horror film has a lot of these elements of
yeah,
there's a strong supernatural force that's kind of like coming into um, that's kind of blurring the lines between like psychological breakdown, right? And so there's points
yeah,
where you kind of question, like, is this person seeing these things for real or are they imagined? And so that's a big part of Don't Look Now, right? He
yeah,
doesn't know, like, if this is his daughter, if
yeah,
these visions he's having are real, all this stuff. And we find out at the end, it's like the answer is both yes and no, right? Because this little, person that he's seeing
right,
is not his dead daughter, but he does end up having these premonitions with his like, psychic abilities to see his own death, but he can only see a part of it, right? He can't see, he
Yeah.
doesn't know that he's going to be the one who's dying, but he sees enough of it that where it comes full circle, so the audience realizes it at the very end. And that's that twist right there, like you said, that's what really makes the movie.
Yeah.
um, so I liked
Yeah.
it. I mean, and
Yeah.
Donald Sutherland is great. I'll watch anything with him in it. He's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. He's also just one of
Yeah.
those, he's just such an interesting looking person, like it, you know, and his acting is, he can do that
Hmm.
thing where if he's overacting, he still looks serious. He has that kind of like
Hmm.
um, presence, on screen presence. I think a lot of it. I actually saw this other clip of Michael Caine explaining how to act, and it was funny. He just basically,
Hmm.
the easiest way he could explain it is don't blink, and he shows examples. He shows people, like he says like, all right, I'm gonna look past the
Hmm.
camera. I'm gonna blink in this. He blinks, and then he shows himself not blinking for another shot,
Right.
and it's a total difference. And Donald
Yep.
Sutherland is one of those things with his giant eyes, and he's just sort of like staring, and like if he's not blinking, and it adds. I don't. It's
Yeah.
definitely one of those, like, he
And
was born to be an
there's
actor,
another
and yeah,
approach to that too, whereas like, theatrical actors, they have to do everything like big and outlandish because you're playing to the back of the theater, right? And it's the
yeah,
exact opposite with
yeah,
film actors, because you're getting that close up, right? You're seeing their face, you're seeing their eyes, and it's really
yeah,
tight. um, and one of the things that they tell actors is that um, you have to oh, hey, it's Thor. um, you have to instead of like trying to make the face, like just think about something, right? and and if you're thinking
yeah,
about it, it will come across through your face in a close up, right? You don't have
yeah,
to like overtly act like that. But again, like the thing that you're talking about with the eyes, with the not blinking, if the camera captures that and lingers on that, then we're captivated, right? Because we're just kind of like in
yeah,
trance or waiting for something to
yeah.
happen. Um, and yeah, you're right. Donald Sutherland, he has those eyes. It really kind of draw you in.
It, yeah. It's the quiet menace. It's like, even when someone's not doesn't look
Hmm.
like isn't doing anything, it looks like they're thinking. It's a difference between like someone like Brad Pitt, who's a very attractive person, but like, why can't every
Hmm.
attractive person
Right.
look like they're acting? Because not everyone looks like they're thinking.
Yeah.
Some people sit there and it looks like they're not
Yeah.
thinking. That's kind of that's the difference. He looks like he has that kind of quiet reserve, like, I'm judging you, kind
Yeah.
of like I'm trying to assess what's going on. Um, it's like, and
Hmm.
then some, like, actors fall into plenty of traps of,
Right. Yeah.
George Clooney
Right.
looking
Yeah.
down and like
That's
smiling
true.
every time he
Good
does
point.
anything. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, who doesn't love a
Love
good
George Clooney
George
though.
Clooney
Nothing,
movie?
yeah.
So
Handsome
what
bastard.
were some of
Yeah.
your thoughts specifically on the editing? Um,
It was very, I, the editing reflected his
mhm.
mental state. It reflected his kind of thinking. So it's definitely from his point of view, and it definitely reflects, his sort of, um, the fact that he is able to like kind of sense
Mhm.
things, or kind of like, or he thinks he's sensing things at least. Um, and the editing kind of reflects that, especially like at the very end, where like it's like sort of like his life flashing before his eyes,
Mhm.
and or the future things that happen after his life are flashing before his eyes. Um, but it's definitely
Yeah.
it's an editor's edit. It's definitely like, it's very like, editing
Yeah.
is it's like very forefront editing. Um, which is okay. Like, I like seeing, like, it depends on the movie too. Like, like seeing the craft in movies sometimes. Like, it's definitely like part of it. And then I like, and eventually I think when we talk about
Mhm.
Sinners, we'll talk about like when movies like really immerse you. Um, that's a different kind of movie experience. But I still like seeing the craft, and it's very much like an editor's, so like
Hmm.
the things that stand out are the opening scene and the ending. The opening scene, uh, like him, like like it going back and forth between him, looking at these photos and then outside with the daughter. And as soon as something like,
Hmm.
falls over, that's like a sign that
It's
she's
like
falling in the
parallel
water.
editing.
The thing, it's like there's, yeah, parallel editing. And, the ink spilling on
Yeah.
which is one of those like effects that
Yeah.
is probably really hard to do at the time. And is just like, like, and you can't like, I'm sure About Pie at some
Right.
point will have like, wow, this is dated or something. But every so
Right.
often there's something in
Yeah.
films where you're like, oh, that is old. And what are you gonna do? Like the picture didn't quite. I mean, especially because
Hmm.
like the camera's moving a lot throughout the film, so like all of a sudden there's like this very still thing and
Yeah.
it's not doing anything, and then there's sort of ink moving across it. I understand it's probably
Yeah, and
very
one
hard
of
to
the
do, but
things that I noticed too with the
of the
editing is
time,
like, these intentional jarring cuts, right? And sometimes they're quick and sometimes they're
yeah,
just like you just see it cut to something random, and it just makes you think for a second,
yeah,
like, I don't know, it's one of those movies you got to go back and watch it a second
yeah,
time once you know what's going to happen, because like then you can really see each little like part of what they're trying to do, and everything is
yeah,
intentional. And the film is directed by
yeah,
Nicholas Roeg, who also did The Man Who Fell from Earth,
yeah,
The Man Who Fell to Earth, the David Bowie film. And that is kind of takes it to another level, because the editing on that is just brilliant. I mean, have you seen that movie? So
I
it's,
have not
I mean,
seen
it's a
it.
good movie
No.
overall, but like to study the editing, it's kind of a masterclass in editing, because it's nonlinear. It spans like decades, and it's always jumping around. But at the same time, like you never really question what's going on in terms of like you always know where you're at. It's not confusing, but to see things
Yeah,
jump around, in this one like person's perspective, who's like David Bowie, he's like this alien. um it's just really good, and so you can see that the craftsmanship of the editing through the director Nicholas Roeg,
yeah,
and most of his films are like that as well. So um yeah, if you haven't seen that one, you would love it. I mean, especially as a David Bowie fan, you
yeah.
have to
I
you
love
have
that.
to you have to see it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say we'll put that on. I do love that jarring type of editing where there's something kind of when you match two things that
Hmm.
sort of like you have to like it puts you back in
Right.
the seat of the theater. Like, wait, what's going on? Oh, like when he's yelling and then it or the wife's yelling and it cuts to him
Hmm.
drilling or someone drilling, little things like that. I do love that also, and I think
Right.
that's actually some editing you don't see a lot anymore. Um, someone like that, you're a hard kind of cut that yeah,
Hmm.
it can't be overused. Like if you overuse it, then it's just kind of annoying and kind of like,
Hmm.
but like when it's used really well,
Yeah.
I think it's great. There's one of those in About Pie, but where someone like kind of cuts mid laugh to the next scene of that same person talking,
Hmm.
and it was very intentional, but and there's the reason there's only one of them is because it's not something you want to like, if it and it's only I think it only works when you
Hmm.
make the edit, watch it through, and see like, oh, that worked. Like it's not necessarily something where like the science of editing, where like, oh no, this is like that makes sense. Okay,
Hmm.
where there's no
Right.
continuity errors, like the person's still looking in the right direction. Oh, there's a change in the conversation, so we have to cut to a different angle. That's just like one of the
Hmm.
things like you play around, you see if
Yeah.
it works, and then you play it
Yeah,
back
and I
like, oh,
think
that
that
actually
there's
kind of works if
definitely
we want to leave
a
it in.
movement towards invisible editing. But I've always
Yeah,
really been a fan of more artistic and creative choices in editing, because let's face it, that's one of the defining factors of cinema, right? Is the fact that you can alter time and show
right.
the audience what you want them to see, right? And I'm a
Yeah,
real big fan of nonlinear editing and having things jump back and forth. And there's
Yeah.
another movie that I just recently watched last week. Have you seen Strange Darling?
Yes.
Yeah,
Wait,
it's kind of like a
Strange, that came,
serial
it's like a horror
killer
movie
type of.
that came out.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, is
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Loved that editing. That editing
yeah.
was like,
I
you
want
go,
to
you
get you
go.
worked
I
up.
could
That
just
was the
about to get me
point.
all worked up.
I'm baiting you. Um, so that movie is told in 6 chapters, but they're completely out of order. But it
Yep.
all works so brilliantly together. And if you
Yep.
showed it like in a complete linear fashion, it would just take the sting out of it, right?
Yeah.
Because the whole point is they're
Yeah.
trying to hide like who the killer is, you know. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And it also, the way it like, there's a lot of the editors, you can see a lot of either the editor or the
Hmm.
director's like choices. You see it's very for like the titles of each chapter, um the even the choice of chapters, and technically
Right.
speaking, sometimes I'm like, does that really have to be
Yeah.
whatever number it is? I
Hmm.
haven't seen it in maybe about a year, but I remember thinking like, oh, you're just like, it's like you could almost sense
Right.
that the editor and director like kind of messing with you, but it's okay. It's like sort of a wink and a nod.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
I
was
love
great.
that
I
movie.
was
I thought
I
that
was
movie was
pleasantly
that movie was
surprised.
great.
I'd heard that the acting was great in it, so I wanted to see it
Yeah.
for that. But I was blown away by the editing. I mean, it was like, I haven't really seen a movie where I was just like totally
Yeah.
in love with the editing for a long time, and that just really got me going. And to touch on your
Yeah.
point about the director and the editor like screwing with us, I mean, it's a total like case of, unreliable narrator from the very beginning because they lie to you in the first title
Yes.
card to tell you that this is a true story that actually happened, which is just
Yeah.
total bullshit. And I love that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like it's almost an homage to
Yeah.
Fargo because like they're like this is like based on a true story. I'm like this
Yep.
is not. This is just you made this up,
Is it-
okay? But it's I love when they do stuff
yeah.
like that because like who are we to determine what's real and what's not? It doesn't matter, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, Strange Darling,
Yeah.
great movie. I
Yeah.
loved it. But yeah, it really
Great
even got
movie.
me thinking
Yeah.
about the Dødsmark because the way that we talked about this movie is it takes place over 4 days or basically 3.5 days, and we've got it split up so that you actually see the days are kind of worked out like that. But it just got me thinking about like, does it make sense to do it all in
Yeah.
linear order or random? Now, the way that the script is right now is it's sort of bookended because you see day 4, and then it goes back to day
Yeah.
1, day 2, day
Mhm.
3, and then you wrap it up with
Yep.
day 4 again. So we sort of have a non-linear structure to begin with, but it just got me thinking about like some different ways that we could approach the edit on that as well. Um, not necessarily to throw it completely out of order, but these are the types of things that I'm thinking about as we're writing the script. Because if we're going to be also filming this and editing it, we can make any of these choices that we want, right? And normally when you're just writing a spec script,
Right.
you've got to
Yeah.
write it just kind of in a linear fashion for the most part because it's going out to somebody who's doesn't know anything about it. They need to be able to easily read it, but in this case,
Yeah.
this is our movie. We're going to make this movie, and so we can do with it whatever we want. We can write
Yeah.
it and edit it however we want as well. So, um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's also an element of a book, or necessarily like a there's also like notes and a diary. There's some like elements inside the film that could be used. I mean, from a, like as a title card, as like kind of a wink and a nod. Um And there's something about like, I mean, if you can like make the argument that when you're reading someone's diary, or reading some like, if you were to find a diary or
Hmm.
someone's notes from a long time ago, you're not reading something linear. You're very like, you're
Right.
experiencing someone's like thoughts in a non-linear fashion. Unless you sit and read the
Hmm.
diary like page for page. But a lot of times, like let's say you were to pick up like an old relative's or long
Yeah.
gone relative's diary, you're probably going to skip around, or like, skip to
Sure.
the end and see what's the last thing they wrote and stuff like that. So that could be an element that's worked in, and also could, I
Yeah.
mean, even a scene of that, the main character doing that, reading the end, as kind of a way
Hmm.
to show that's exactly what we're doing, which is one of those like winks and nods that in Strange
Right.
Darling,
Yeah.
it's like I enjoyed being fucked with a little bit. It wasn't, you kind of, yeah, like it's funny. It's
Right.
especially like the title cards were like part of that, like kind of like it's okay to acknowledge that we're all sitting in a movie theater watching a movie, and
Yeah,
that
for sure.
it's
Do
supposed
you
to be
want to
fun.
just talk real quick about like where we're at with the script? I can kind of like catch you up a little bit. So, okay, so last time we
Yeah,
talked,
absolutely.
basically where we were at with the script is um, you had written a few scenes and made some changes and then sent it back over to me. And I've just been spent the last like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks going through it, writing some new scenes, editing some of the other ones, and just basically fixing some structural things and some, just addressing some problems with the
Yeah,
script. So right now, um, I've basically made it all the way through the entire script. So we've got a full plot worked out. And I
nice.
think right now, the next thing to really do is add in some of the fun and games in Act Two to really kind of fill some things out. And then
Okay.
add in some of those other details, like you mentioned. So the last thing I wrote was actually a scene where Madeline, the main character, she's like a children's author, but she's like I would say it's like more of like
Yeah,
uh like young adult type of like stuff for like teenagers basically. It's not like picture books for children
yeah, yeah,
necessarily, but so
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a scene where she's actually writing something, and she had found the box of things from her father that he had left behind, his research and all of these things about these folklores, right? And that sort of like spurred her inspiration, got her going again. And so we see her writing, and so we see what she's writing on the screen, but then it's also a voiceover in her head, so we actually hear the things that she's writing. And I want
Yeah,
more little elements like that in there, like just kind of sprinkled throughout, whether it's, like you mentioned, it could be like a journal that she found and like looking through and that sort of stuff. And it could be stuff
yeah,
that we actually hear, like her, her internal monologue sort of thing. I think that sprinkling those sorts of things and those sorts of details are going to really bring another layer in there. So I think that like where the script's at right now is basically just
yeah,
filling it out with things like that. I'm adding some more weird elements and so forth, but
yeah,
I'm almost ready to like send it back to you to have you look over everything. I'm just kind of cleaning it up and finishing one or more scenes, and then you can look at it, tell me what you think. Some of the stuff that
nice.
you wrote, I rewrote, primarily because, we originally
Yeah,
had this set in a rainstorm, sort of flood sort of situation. We decided that we were going to
right.
do
Yeah,
a winter situation, like a winter storm. And so, like,
a
all of that
winter.
stuff that we wrote had to be changed and
Yeah,
modified a little bit. Um, oh, look, it's Sonia.
yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Sonia.
Daddy's in a
Oh,
podcast.
look at that smile.
Want to say hi to Josh?
He is in the
Hi.
podcast. Hi.
She's just home from
You
school.
can't hear me, but hi.
I know.
Oh,
Well, daycare. We
school
call it
already.
school. So
Yeah,
so yeah, that's kind of where we're at with the script. And I'm pretty happy with it because like
nice.
I think it was a little bit incoherent and not very cohesive. There's a lot of holes in it, and there was also a lot of things that were kind of repetitive,
Yeah, yeah,
just in terms of like the things, the
yeah,
supernatural things that they experience. Um, so I fixed a lot of that. A lot of the problems that the script had have now been
yeah.
addressed. And then you had left a whole list of scenes that were sort of like outlines or just ideas for scenes, and some of those I
Towards
made.
the end.
Some of them just were became irrelevant or redundant. Um, and
Right.
there's a couple of
Yeah.
scenes that I'll talk with you off air to decide whether or not you want to add those in. There's scenes that like you wrote. One of them is there's like a scene where it's at the sheriff's station. Um, there's and then there's one
Hmm.
other one. I'll have to pull it up and see what it is. But basically, there's two
Yeah.
scenes that you wrote that I took out because they just weren't working anymore. But I didn't completely eliminate them. They're just kind of like set to the side for right now. And then
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
see. So I'm excited for you to see what we've put
Yeah.
together
I'm
so far
excited
because
to read it.
it's definitely
And
come a long way. It really has, just in a couple of months here. Um,
yeah.
Also, I was thinking about something that we
Nice.
talked about the last time we met. I came up to LA and we met and we had kind of a writing session up there and talked about had a production meeting. And one of the things I was mentioning to Josh here was that every script I've ever written secretly is a Western. And, and I was thinking about how does that
Yes.
apply to
Yeah.
this? Now this is this is a it's a folk horror film, sort of a cabin in the woods type of thing, right?
Yeah.
That takes place at this lake house. His family's isolated in the woods, and I was thinking about sort of some of the Western themes that just sort of come across here. And so, do you want to hear what I came up with? Yes.
Can I guess one? The sheriff or the deputy has a cowboy hat on. That's going to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always envisioned him having one anyway.
Well,
So there's one. It's our now. It's a
yeah, I
horse.
mean,
It's a horse
I
away from
didn't
being a
actually think
western.
of the cowboy hat specifically, but yes, the deputy, the sheriff, is like a typical archetype character in the Western, who's
Yeah.
and it's usually
Yeah.
like a lawman that's like alone by himself. I mean, in a modern sort of situation, you can
Yep.
think of like, No Country for Old Men or something like that. That's more of like a modern
Yes.
western sort of thing, but that type of character is very typical of westerns. But in terms of like just some of the themes, you've got stuff like the isolated frontier outpost, where it's like, this is like this is a
Yeah.
cabin in the woods sort of thing that's really isolated. It's far away from everything. We even when we do see like other signs of civilization, it's very sparse, right? There's like a bar in town and a gas station, and that's
Yeah.
basically about it. There's also the theme of man versus nature. We're talking about like the storm coming in, the extreme cold, but also the creature, that represents that, that's symbolic of this natural
Yeah.
thing that's trying to kill them. Um, and we talked about like doing like an extreme temperature drop as sort of a situation that they're dealing with, because primarily, as much as it sounds great to have like a snowstorm or a blizzard, when you're dealing with an ultra low budget film, you just may not get lucky, right? We're going to be filming outdoors in the winter in the
Yeah.
snow,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you never know if it's going to be snowing, how much snow you're going to get. And so kind of have to just like weigh these things out as you're writing this stuff.
Yeah. And lucky is very relative. Like, yes, you'd be lucky to have some snow falling, but if it's a
Yeah.
lot of snow, you might also, it's going to make life that much harder out there. It's not,
Yeah.
you hope to have tents and, like all sorts of like things actually keep people like
Yeah,
from the
for
snow,
sure.
but we might not have those things. So
It'll
temperature
work
drop.
though. I mean, with all the other elements, and we're gonna have some like fog and
Yeah.
haze, and make some of that stuff just to give it some
Yeah.
atmosphere, which will give us the look and the vibe that we're going for. I think will be achievable on our budget. But yeah, I mean, I just thought some of these things, and like I didn't really intentionally like add these things in. It's just one of those things I kind of like went through like, okay, does this end up being a Western? But there are some other some tropes and themes in there, like the cryptic oracle. Like usually there's like, somebody that's like
Yeah.
telling the old
Yeah.
story about, the Indians or whatever it is, or
Yep.
the cursed gold or whatever it is. And we've got a character like that, our old spindly man. Yeah. I gave
Which
him like
sounds like
kind
a
of like a
character from a Western.
Scandinavian
That's like,
name. His name is Halvar.
ooh,
Yeah. We
Halvard.
can modify
I
that,
like
but
that.
he didn't have a name, so I was just like, I'll give him something. So just another background on this. This is sort of like a blend of traditional Scandinavian folklores, and so the title Dødsmark
Yeah.
means the death field. Um, I know we're still kind of we haven't
Yep.
100% determined that that's going to be the title, but that's our working title right now. This is kind of like gives us the overall feel of what we're trying to achieve here.
I mean, if it comes down to an
Right.
investor, it's like, I'll give you the money,
Right.
but change the title. Then we can
I,
discuss
I do
changing the
too.
title.
I
But for
think
right now,
Lake
I like
Dødsmark could
Dødsmark.
work as well.
I'm being honest.
I know Hunter has his opinions on it, but like
Yeah.
Hunter is Hunter. So
Yeah.
let's see if he can fight us on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Get the
Get
money
us
and we'll
some
change the title.
fucking
There we go.
money.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
There we
But
go.
yeah, so
Easy
there's
trade.
so I like having some of these like Scandinavian names, and we talked about filming this in Chicago, and the upper Midwest in general, it has a lot of Scandinavian immigrants. There's a big cultural thing in, Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of Illinois, lots of Scandinavian
Yeah.
ancestry there. So that's actually where we want to film this, is in Illinois. We're going to try to find a lake house up there where we can just find the perfect location. And that's sort of a character in this movie, and so that's like one of the most
Yeah.
important things for us to figure out is,
Yeah.
where are we going to find this isolated, cabin in the woods type of thing that has a very unique look to it. We want sort of like a modern A-frame style house that's so that it looks like it's not blending into the background, right? It's very stark against the
Yeah.
natural elements. And so you really got this like theme of like man versus nature, and modernism versus,
Yeah.
the old ways sort of thing, which I really like. Yeah.
I mean, all we need to do is write in one dream sequence with a horse, you
Right.
know,
I know.
and it's a
Yeah.
western. It can be. We could go get some stock footage,
Yeah.
put some stock footage of a horse.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a horse
Right. That's
skeleton at some
true.
point. I mean,
Yeah, I mean
western.
that would be the easy way.
It's
The
done.
hard way is to
Yeah.
make it metaphorically a western, which is right, right.
Oh, you
It's
you
a
don't
it's
want
a
to
horror
actually make
film,
this a
but
western. I
no,
get
I
it.
just find it
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Like I always have like the
Yeah.
proclivity to like, or I gravitate toward those type of stories. I guess there's like this very like
Yeah.
there's something about like the American West and westerns in general that are just so American that um, it's mythological in itself, right? Like we've romanticized it. Obviously, it was a
Yeah.
horrendous situation for the people who live there, but we have we have
Yeah.
revisionist history. We can write whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. We can make the movies we want, and so we can make it however we see fit, which is great. But I don't know. There's just been always something about those types of stories that I've been really drawn to. And so even when I'm doing
Yeah.
something that's clearly not a Western, like the themes like are very attractive to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And everything's
Yes. I mean,
everything's.
you
Can we just
probably
argue that
could. You
everything's
could
a
probably.
western? Right.
I mean,
Yeah, everything
Is
shot in
Jurassic
America is a
Park a
western
Western?
by nature.
I know. I know.
Absolutely. Look at his hat. What hat
Yes.
is he wearing the whole time? It's obviously a western. I don't know
Yes.
if
Let's just say it.
yeah, it's a western. Let's just say
That's
western.
true.
They're
Yeah.
outside like the whole time.
It's a little
Yeah.
tropical, but
Um tropical western.
yeah.
Like there
Yeah,
hasn't
I'll
been a
think about
tropical
that one.
western. I don't know. I will say also another reason we're gonna shoot in
Hmm.
Illinois and something we've been like uh researching lately. It does help that I'm moving to Illinois, but is tax incentives. We have, like doing our research, and there's other states like this too, where the threshold for uh, tax incentives and tax
Yeah.
rebates are so much lower than California, where California is $1 million. And in a place like Illinois, it's $100,000 for a 25% return you know, um, on spend. And I
Hmm.
mean, like it has to be, you have to like meet certain requirements. Filming in Illinois using
Yeah.
uh, crew from Illinois. All sorts. There's like not everything will be recoupable because but as much as if you can do $100,000 worth of budget and it's recoupable, I mean, like that's such a lower threshold and so much more
Yeah.
advantageous to low budget filmmaking. Um, and there's other states like that too. We also saw
Hmm.
that New Mexico has a great competitive and has like certain, even different sections of
Yeah.
New Mexico have different rebates, which is great. So there's a bunch of stuff like that out there that makes it just so much
Yeah,
more,
and that's one of the reasons most of the productions are
advantageous.
leaving LA. But just to touch on Illinois specific, like last week, I did a super deep dive into like all the details of that stuff after we had talked, and it looks like now they're actually offering thirty
Yeah,
percent. And the main benefit, I mean, beyond what you mentioned with the 100,000 threshold, is that there's no limit, right? There's I mean, it's like
and
California is
that was
like
the next thing
making
I
a
was gonna
big
bring
deal
up.
about how they're raising their limit to $750 million. But the problem is like it's still only going to be the big budget films that get that incentive, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Netflix spends billions of dollars a year just making
Hmm.
content, and if a portion of that is shot in California, that's like, that could suck up, most of that cap. And I understand like they don't want to like if they're making so many things in California, but like I mean, you can make the argument that what's the bringing business to a place like Illinois if there's
Right.
no cap on that tax incentives, like that means everyone can go
And
there
that's one of the
and know that
reasons
they're
why
going to
so
get
many
it, and there's
things
no
are still
lottery,
filming
there's
in
no
Georgia because there's no
um
cap there either. They got like 25-30%,
yeah,
and they built out all these studios. So they've got the local infrastructure, they've got the local cast and crew, all that stuff. And I'm pretty sure California also, with their incentives, it's only for production. It's not for post production work, which is terrible because in Illinois it
oh
actually covers post production.
yeah,
So, for example, if we
yeah,
hire a music composer or sound designer or work with anyone in post production that lives in Illinois or their business is based out of Illinois, we can use that tax incentive to recoup our costs, which you can't do that in
yep,
California. So there's
yeah,
so yeah, I think
yeah,
this is definitely the right project for us to dive into that and see how it works out. But it sounds like it's going to
yeah,
be perfect for this. We're trying to stay within that $100,000 budget because if we get 30% back, or let's say even 25% of
yeah,
that back, you have a really good film for 75 grand. And not to
yeah,
mention, on top of that, everything there is already just cheaper, right? The labor costs are cheaper. The
yeah,
talent pool
yeah,
is great, but you don't have to pay them the same that you're paying, actors that are working out of LA.
yeah,
So it'll be really interesting to see how this goes. But I'm excited to shoot something in Illinois. To be honest with you, there's so much there, and there's so much
yeah,
history there too. I mean, we've talked about this, but like back in the '80s, there was like this huge amount of productions that were going on in the
yeah,
Chicago area. It was something at some point like 85% of Hollywood films were shot in the Chicago area. I mean, it was insane. So
yeah,
they've got this like really rich
yeah,
history, which is great. And I know both of us are students of film history, and so when you think about all these like places where iconic movies were shot and so forth, just for me, the idea of like being able to go there and shoot something is really exciting too. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes.
I'm
And the tax
looking
incentives.
forward to
Did
it,
we
and
mention
tax
that?
incentives. Come on,
because
Yeah.
they're fairly
Did we
good.
mention that there's tax incentives? I mean, anything that helps, you know, obviously different countries have different structures,
Hmm.
and a lot of other countries, in Europe, like straight up just give a lot of grants to films. Tax incentive seems to be more of the approach in the United States. So, you gotta take advantage of, you know,
Hmm.
anything, any
Yes.
advantage you can take
Take advantage of
advantage
all the
of.
advantages.
I'll work on this. Take advantage of
Yes.
every advantage you can
That's
advantage.
great.
You
That's
know,
great advice. It really is.
we'll get there.
Well, you're writing
I'm a
things. I don't
born
know if you were
writer.
born that way, but you're doing it now. So that's the important thing, right? Yeah.
That's funny.
So,
That's the important thing.
well, do
Yeah.
you want to wrap this up for today?
Yeah. We didn't
Yeah.
exactly have time to talk about
I'll
Sinners.
probably
We can
see
do
it
it next
again by
time.
then.
I enjoyed the movie, but
Did you see it in the
wow. So
70
you really
millimeter
liked it?
IMAX?
No, I might go see it
Yeah.
again just to do that, but I didn't. But I saw it in Dolby, which was in terms
Yeah.
of the sound design. I mean, just the sound and the music, everything was
I
just it
I saw
was
it in the
wonderful.
so-called
But
Limax, the digital IMAX, which was still pretty. It was still pretty good.
oh, right.
But so the closest
Yeah.
70 millimeter IMAX to me is in Irvine at the Irvine Spectrum, and I went there to see
Okay.
Interstellar when
Yeah.
that came out, and it's an amazing theater. It's one of the best
Yeah.
theaters I've ever been in. But like with the kids and everything else going on, I just haven't been able to drive up there. It's like it's an hour and a half drive each way for me, and then you have to deal with like the screening times of these aren't always the best. And so I was able to see
Yeah.
it here locally at an AMC IMAX, digital IMAX, and it was still incredible. But the nice thing is, so I know
Yeah.
you've got an IMAX near you at the City Walk, and the
Yeah.
City Walk
Yeah.
and the
It's
Irvine
glorious,
Spectrum
I
are
have to
both
admit.
giving out those really cool, like commemorative film strips. So if you see it there, you get like an actual like 70 millimeter
Oh,
film strip of a part of a print. Um, they're still doing it.
are they still doing
But I
this?
think it's going to exit
Oh
the
my god, I'm gonna.
theaters pretty quickly here because I think something else is coming in that's going to take up those theaters. Um, yeah, so check that out.
Oh, I'm hitting that in the
But I do know
morning.
for sure those two specifically are have been offering that, which is cool. So if I can make it back up there
Yeah.
to see it again, I would love to if I can make it work
Yeah.
next week sometime. So we'll see. Yeah.
This is the whole reason to podcast is
Yeah,
to find out that
I know.
I'm gonna
Well,
go do that tomorrow.
but it
Yeah.
was good catching up with you, and I'll send the script over to you this week so you can
Yep.
get back to work and and keep writing
Sounds
because
good.
you're a
Got
born writer. Yeah,
gotta keep writing. I'm a born
I
writer.
will.
Yeah. Take
I'll take
advantage of my
advantage of your
writing.
writing.
You know.
Um, okay, well, we'll talk to you soon,
Yeah.
and thanks for joining me. Thanks everyone
Yeah.
for
Sounds good.
listening and watching this on YouTube.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.